On episode 133 of the Vincast, I chat with Loic Avril, head sommelier for Dinner by Heston, Melbourne. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Gasbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and yet another delay to get another episode up. I do apologise, as always. It can be a very much challenge to run this little podcast all on my own, and with time constraints to do with my work and my home life and my burgeoning wine business. Sometimes finding the time to actually both organize a recording, doing the editing and putting it up can be very, very difficult. So I do appreciate your patience. I have recorded the first episode for this year, which will be coming out very soon. I have some more episodes in the pipeline. I hope I'll be able to sit down with some more fascinating guests. But this episode is one that I recorded last year with a very good colleague and friend, and someone I have very much enjoyed working with in the last couple of years. His name is Loic Avril, originally from France. He is the head sommelier for Dinner by Heston here in Melbourne, and is an incredible sommelier, and very soon I'm sure will become a master sommelier. But we had a chat about his background, and it was fantastic to hear about some of the great places that he's worked in his career. So I do hope you enjoy the episode. Please stick around until the end to find out how you can get in touch with Loic and myself if you did enjoy it. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Loic, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here in the Vincast studio. Welcome, and thank you very much for making some time to be a guest.
Thank you very much for welcoming me back. Welcome me in your house, and thank you very much again.
Loic, I start every episode of my podcast asking my guest if they can remember the first interaction that they had with wine that made them realize that there was something special about wine that possibly started them on a path towards working with wine.
Actually, it was almost 15 years ago.
Well,
in the middle of Loire Valley, where I'm from.
Which part of the Loire Valley? Because it's a very long
obviously
valley.
It's very broad, definitely. So surrounding Tours, where my family house is close to the Vouvray region, and we are within that beautiful AOC of Vouvray. So just discovering many different things, but being a child and living in the countryside is always more easy to play either in the vineyard or playing in the field and stuff like that. So everything started in that area, but the whole love of wine became a little bit more realistic as soon as I started to work in this beautiful place in Azel Rideau, which is where wines are very well produced as well. But that gentleman has amazing wine cellar, so I had the opportunity to go there and to experience a bit more about the wines.
Your family doesn't have any involvement with the wine business at all?
We do. My grandfather used to have some lands and vineyards, but never kind of sell the grapes, and never kind of make them, let's say. So we already had a few lands and few vineyards and few forests and stuff like that. So we had a certain connection without to have the connection of making the wines, but always that inspiration of being in that kind of industry of culture and, let's say, farming, more than anything else. So that was the first link. But my grandfather always had a lot of wine at home, so we already had so many friends surrounding Vouvray, where obviously so many beautiful producers are located. So there is already a good connection from that.
And was wine and food important for your family as you were growing up?
Always. It's been always, as to be, let's say, French, you always spend a lot of time within the family and at the table.
Mm-hmm.
You usually spend between 3 to 4 hours every weekend. So tradition has to be first aperitif for at least 2 hours.
Uh-huh.
and then after you're following with the starters for at least an hour and a half, and then you do the same with the rest of the courses. So you end up to start at 12 and finish at 7 with a few bottles going throughout.
Just a few.
Just few, and it's always been obviously interacting for a kid, whatever the age you are, you always ask questions. So there is always more and more to discover throughout that. And obviously, more you're growing up, and more you're actually understanding all these facts, I would say.
Do you remember your family enjoying wines from the area a lot, or did they kind of enjoy wines throughout France and maybe even further?
I mean, in terms of our social life, my family always kind of focus more on local and cheaper wines, I would say. It's
I
been
know a lot of very good inexpensive wines from that area.
exactly, you can always like kind of purchase things around 5-6 euros and be very very happy with the quality of the wines, and obviously that is make Loire Valley to be in certainly more accessible than other region back in France. But the time when I was 5-10 years old, definitely it was even cheaper than that. So there is always more, let's say, accessibility to those wines in the time. So we could face and open beautiful wines from back vintage and even a release vintage as 5-6 euros and have an amazing bottle.
Did your family have any expectations for you as far as your career, or did they kind of encourage you to follow your own path?
It's never been influential. I come from a very, let's say, quite not middle class, even lower than that. My family never had a chance to have money in their house, but their kids and the way they actually educate each kids has been great to see. And even now, I think after all these years, I can really appreciate everything I've done and everything that has been done to me for the last few years, because everything belongs from that. So my involvement to the family, the respect and the education has been crazy on that. But overall, I think no, everything has been none from them, but only from my part to become a better person.
So, as far as your, later high school and beyond, what did you think about you wanted to do? Did you have ideas about working in hospitality? What was your first job?
So I was about 10 years old, and it was one of the kind of like subject at school, and it was just imagining or have a certain picture of what we want to do in the future. And we had like different things in the library, and they give us like folders, and it was position and kind of like read through the position and see if it was any interest. And I came through that page that was actually receptionist. And I look actually, the first things I was looking at is what was the salary that you will get from that. And when I look at it, I was like, oh, okay, it's pretty good. So it's maybe something I should do. And from there, 10 years old, it took me about 4 years to actually start from my first, let's say, apprenticeship restaurant, where I was still in my, let's say, college school last year, where I actually succeed very well. And even my educator or my teachers were like, oh, you should continue to high university level because you have the degree for it. And I was like, I know, but I want to follow my path, which is hospitality, and I want to work in a Michelin-Star restaurant, where a couple of months ago I did actually a stage in a Three-Michelin-Star restaurant in Tours, which was one of the most kind of iconic restaurants in that town. And since then, I didn't leave it. I just follow my believing and say, okay, you know what? Even though I have the qualification, the degree on exceeding my expectation of studies, I decide to actually do an apprenticeship in hospitality, and since then, this is who I am.
Can you remember those early experiences and potentially what was it about that kind of work that appealed to you quite a lot? What did you enjoy about it most?
I mean, at the beginning, like it was more like a Discovery Channel, I would say. Being from a very not poor family, but
Honest,
honest
simple.
family, simple family. We live simple, and as soon as you start to work in beautiful dining, i.e., beautiful tablecloth and amazing rooms with chandelier and amazing kind of suit and beautiful polished shoe and all this all these kind of ceremony and all these
Attention to detail.
vibrancy of the restaurant start to kind of open my eyes, and even though the all gold, silver, all these approach, you're like, wow, you feel like you're in a movie. You want to exceed that interior. I would say has to become inside of you. Just to be a bit more fashionable.
Sure.
But overall, I think it's been when I look back, when I first entered this restaurant, I was a little bit shy, and you are shy, and I am shy in general. And what put me outside of my boundaries is definitely the talking, the sociability of the work that make me to continue that business, because outside of work I'm a little bit more reserved, and actually when I enter a dining room I feel like I am in a theater.
So even those early days, you were working with some people that you found the working relationship very good, and there was everyone had this very dedicated idea about quality must be very good, and we all work together as a team. This was a positive influence as well.
The positive was there, but more or less is obviously my drive. One thing I remember, the first time I actually went for a job interview was for my first restaurant, and even the gentleman was like, "Oh, I'm very surprised that actually you have made that decision to you, because no, your parents was not involved." I was like, "Yes, I know. It was more me to drive that kind of interview. I like be able to call the person in charge, like which is the gentleman that I was talking with, and say, you know what, I really want to do this, and I think I can do it." So it was more, let's say, a challenge, but at the same time to say, you know what, I'm enough mature to be able to do it.
Was this something, a part of your decision was kind of doing it yourself? You felt, there was independence to it, and to say, I'm passionate about this. This is a path that I would like to follow.
I think when more and more I look back, and it looks like my road was already drawn by someone.
Really? Okay.
Is everything as I have done the last few years is, it looks like it's been so smooth and integrated.
Everything made sense.
So everything makes sense from the beginning. I think everything was, there's already a draft instantly in my head, but actually everything came along with time, and everything, like sometimes you think things are made for you, and it's a little bit like that.
How long were you working in hospitality before wine started to become a bit more important for you, and you started to work more with wine?
I mean, I started in 2002, so if you look back now, it's 15 years.
Yes.
Actually, more than 16 years. So for a gentleman like me, which is 32, it looks like, 16 years, wow, it's amazing. The achievement and how long you've been there. But actually, it's like, for me, it's like yesterday. So everything is like, you don't take it for granted. You just want to work harder and harder and try to achieve a new legacy of, all these things. But more or less, I would say, it's been 2 years after my first apprenticeship in the restaurant. I did my stage in Three-Star for 3 months. I was still in school, and I thought, yeah, it's what I want to do. So I applied for that job in a small restaurant. It was not even a Michelin-Star, but from the beginning, that has been a recommendation from the gentleman from the Three-Star, because that gentleman used to work for them. So I applied to this restaurant. I was like, I want to be a waiter and see how it goes. And I remember the first Christmas we had all together, because it was a very familiar restaurant. They just give me a Larousse, which is one of the books that is done for wine or anything like that. And they give me that wine book. And the first things I actually, in my head, I was like, why they give me a wine book? It's never been in my plan to be a sommelier or working in wine, but I was like, okay, it makes sense, because if you work in the front of house, you need to know about wine. So I was like, okay, fine. That was the first link, I would say. And I still think about it and talk about it, because we have a very good relationship. After 16 years, I still go to France every year, and every year is my destination is go back to the restaurant where I start.
Wow. I mean, of course, it probably helps that your family's still in just outside of Tours.
Yeah, always. We're surrounding this restaurant, so we are about 5K from the house. So it's always something
Perfect.
as a destination for us. We like to, as a gathering, go back with the family, and obviously family is getting bigger and bigger. So we always have that opportunity to be in that restaurant and still explore or experience a little bit more the dining and the experience of that restaurant. And I feel always very, very privileged that it's always good to keep relationship with obviously your first, let's say, employer.
It's also great that still same owners and they're still running the restaurants. In Australia, it's not so common for restaurants to be open for 15, 20, 30 years. So to be able to kind of come back to this place and for it to be familiar, and like you say, to kind of go back to where the journey really started for you must be a very rewarding experience. And also, I guess, to share this with your family and other loved ones.
I mean, I remember the first things when I was 11, 12, I couldn't afford anything than just running in the field and being in my home house with my parents and having friends where they could afford anything. They could just go to the cinema, go to the bowling, and I couldn't do it because my family didn't have the money to be able to pay me those things. So I just wanted to do a life for me, and at the end of the day, when I obviously, you're being influencing you when you are young, you are a boy, you are 12, 13, you want to be, you know, you want to reflect things or you want to replicate things that you see from your friends, which are sometimes not good or sometimes which are bad for you. And obviously, I had a lot of bad influence at the beginning, but at the same time, I had the chance to have an amazing education where it has been a lot of sacrifice for the kids, and my parents did it in the right way, not for them but for us to become better. And I think from there, I became better because I wanted to become someone that has the independence to be able to to buy things for yourself, and that was my only way.
It sounds like that they gave you a very good appreciation for enjoying what you have in making the most of what you have and to push yourself that you can achieve more rather than having things just given to you. You
Yeah,
must work for it. You must and the value in achieving something for yourself is much greater than just having things given to you.
is definitely. I mean, my one goal is obviously all the time I think about my accolade or I will say my journey. I will say everything goes back all the time to day one,
Mm.
where I first applied to this restaurant, and when I say, you know what, I will become a better person. And that was always the aim for is how can I become a better person rather than just live in that small countryside city and or village, I would say, and just go with all the friends around and making bad mistake or bad, let's say, bad influences, because you as soon as you go beyond that, bad influences can definitely put your life in danger.
Mm.
But as soon as you decide to do better, life is open to you.
Hmm. Your choices become a little bit easier. What was the first big step into working in wine, working as a sommelier?
First things has been so I did those 2 years in this restaurant where I learned more the basics of service and waiting and like normal classic restaurant, French restaurant, where you welcome mostly businessmen or you welcome or you just welcome normal guests. It's been a small kind of understanding of the basics, and it's from there then after you start to understand a bit more about everything, from the beverage part of it, from the service point of view to the kitchen point of view. And I remember one gentleman at the time is like, he looked at me and he's like, you're gonna be a very strong man, you're gonna be a very, very, very talented person. And he's still like 16 years ago now, and I was like, and I still always remember
Mm.
that table where I was, and I still can even sit it in a restaurant and say that was the table and where that person tell me you're gonna be very talented. I was like, at the beginning I didn't understand, and after those 2 years I moved to where my cousin used to be a pastry chef, which is not following anymore the same path, but it was a beautiful restaurant in Azel Rideau in the Central Loire, and beautiful. I mean, amazing hotel restaurant where it was at least 25 beautiful rooms and amazing wine cellar, beautiful dining experience. It was a one Michelin star, and I was like, okay, I will apply there, and I will see. And I did my second degree in university for internship of to be actually a maître d'hôtel, or let's say an head waiter or even a supervisor in restaurant. And I was like, I'm gonna start there and see. And it was during the season. So I started in July 2000 2005. And in August, the sommelier that was there just left. And I don't know why. It's been so much back and forth. And the owner really kind of appreciate my kind of commitment to the business and the way I was working, the way I was looking at things, and the way I was, just humble. But it is, I think for me, is one point which is super important is how you can be humble and work closer to your guests and closer to your partners, that you can achieve things. And that was the first moment. And I remember him to ask me, I can see from the last few months, you are looking directly to the seller. You're getting very passionate about it, and is it something you would like to follow? I was like, I don't know, but I can just try and see. And I remember it was a bottle of 2009 La Marginale from Thierry Germain, Saumur Champigny, La Roche-Neuve. I was tasting this wine. I was like, wow, it's amazing. It's what is the grape for that? It's like, oh, it's Cabernet Franc. It's a native grape variety from the region. I was like, oh, wow, it's amazing. And since then, obviously, as you walk in those beautiful restaurants and you have amazing cellar under the restaurant, it's everything which is old, dusty, moisture by water and things like that. You really actually appreciate that diversity of kind of aging, and I don't know, the overall scene was just perfect for me to grow, definitely.
It's one of the things that I always find fascinating about wine in a restaurant is where you have, it's a very dynamic environment, and every night is a new challenge. You have different customers coming in, and the menu is changing quite regularly, and you have new stuff. But the wine is something that it takes a long time just to go into the bottle, and then a great wine needs to be cellared, and like you say, the cellar, there's it's dust and mold, and so it's this really interesting combination of very now, like this is the present, and things are moving very quickly, but the wines take time. So it's this really interesting combination, and it sounds like this is somewhere that you are kind of able to find this harmony between these two extremes.
There is harmony. There is harmony. Why? Because first, being from Loire Valley, there is always all the heritage of being in beautiful wine region. And when you start and when you start to be a sommelier or you start to be a waiter, there is so much to learn from many different kind of ways of understanding the food, as I said, the service perspective, and also the wine industry, which is more focused to Loire Valley wines, obviously, because we are in a region for that. So I always been exposed to those wines. But the joy behind that is actually the explanation, the vibrancy, the journey that you do along the way. And that there is no, let's say, it's never endless. It's always, ongoing all the time in my head, that there is always something to learn more and more and more and more than just sleeping in our head and say, you know what, everything is achieved. Nah, it's not true.
At what point did you make the decision to seek work outside of the Loire Valley?
I mean, after those 2 years, obviously in this small restaurant where I learned the basics, I moved to that 1 star, and it's there when I really kind of like understanding a bit more wines and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, now I need to do something. I need to do a degree in wine. And obviously, being in France, obviously education in terms of hospitality is very high, and you are, let's say, surrounding by everything. There is no boundaries. There is everything is open to you. So, and I don't know why I end up to be working some of the most amazing 2-Michelin-Star outside of my town. It's still in Loire Valley, but about 300k west side, just on the seaside. beautiful restaurant called Anne de Bretagne. That was run by Madame Vetele, which was actually renowned as a sommelier back at that time. She was actually elected as a best sommelier by the guide, one of the guide Michelin at that time. And I don't know why I ended up to this restaurant. I called them and I was like, I would like just to know if you have a opportunity for a mention complémentaire sommelier, which is like a diploma in sommelier at that time, which is about a year running, and then after you can still continue if you want to, which I did. And after my after my 2 years in that Michelin star, I already planned everything about 3 or 4 months before, so I knew where I was going, but I didn't know what is going to be. But I knew that I wanted to follow that path. And even my girlfriend at the time saying, I don't know what you're following, but let's see. I was like, I don't know as well, but I know that is for me. And I moved there in August 2006 at the time. 2006, yeah. And now it's about 12 years ago now, so which is crazy because that restaurant gave me almost the jump, where I became from a very, very small apprenticeship to someone that I could be, very proud of it. And it's there everything starts, because from there and now everything follow their path.
And so you went from 1 Michelin to 2 Michelin, and working with an incredible sommelier. Did you have ideas about working further away, or getting experience in other countries? Did you have any opportunity to travel?
I mean, I think life is all about connection. The job is all about connection as well. So I never had a plan, more or less. But I think all the time I had that opportunity to have the right partners or the right people to speak with that give me my next challenge. And that is not given to everyone, because it's all about timing. As my dear assistant says to me sometimes, it's all about story and journey. And that is true, because at the time, I had friends where I used to work before that knew someone that worked in England, and he was a master sommelier. And while I was doing this apprenticeship in that 2 Michelin star, where we had 25,000 bottles, 4 different cellars, and amazing kind of tools to work with, I wanted more. So I flew 6 months before. I remember it was in January 2007 to England, in Tunbridge Wells, where I met this gentleman called Dimitri Menard. He was a master sommelier. He passed in 2004, and I met with him, and he's like, oh, okay, you met with my friends, and I know you want to work with different things. I was like, yeah, I just want to apply, perhaps if there is any opportunities. And at that time, it was none. Anyway, I didn't have any way to move there, because I still have 6 months contract with my previous employer. So I was like, it's just for me to kind of draw a certain way of of thinking what I'm gonna do next. And that was a real pleasure to meet people with such passion, and also from the same region, so we were talking the same language or at the same time.
So even though you're working in this 2 Michelin restaurant and 25,000 bottles, was it still a fairly at least fairly focused on the local region, or for French wine?
It was actually everywhere inside of France. Top league Loire, top Provence, Southwest, Bordeaux, Alsace, Champagne, and I'm sure I'm missing some of those, but it was focused a lot from top producers from all over France. We didn't have anything outside of it. It was only French wine. So, but you work with some of the best tool. Every week we had that room at the back of the restaurant, a beautiful place close to the swimming pool. I mean, the place was amazing, and every week we had the tasting either with the head sommelier or the owner, and sometimes the winemaker were coming, because she was quite important in the business. So Olivier Poussier, meilleur sommelier of the world, was coming sometimes twice a year there. So we had this opportunity to see some amazing kind of people in the wine industry. So I don't know. I think I had the right luck at the right time.
And at a certain point, you did get the opportunity to move to England and start working there.
Yeah, I start to in November 2007. I moved to England, knowing that I could speak English, which is not the case because I moved to the northern part of England in York, where I started in Hôtel du Vin, which was run by Gérard Basset at the time. Where at the time I didn't have any kind of understanding who was Gérard Basset until you start to work in Hôtel du Vin, which was leading league of top sommeliers and beautiful wine list. It was obviously classic restaurant bistro, but with amazing wine list. So that was the opportunity to be just a commis sommelier there and see what what life can be. But obviously, in my opportunity, moving to England, it was to become a master sommelier.
Already, you had this idea
Straight from the beginning.
Yeah. So, what was it like to go from working in France, in talking about French wines, to, I'm assuming, if it is called Hôtel des Vins, it was a French restaurant?
It was a French restaurant, very oriented to obviously French cooking, but the cellar was definitely worldwide.
So this was an opportunity for you to work with more wines from around the world, but also to engage with different kind of clientele, and especially in probably a lot more in English.
Yeah, definitely. The English part was very difficult because being a French, you are a little bit lazy about language, as they are as well. But I think the overall perspective was definitely to learn a different kind of strategy about wines and learn a different, just learn a different culture of working and understanding the wine industry, understanding what it is to work in a very high level. And all the time, even though you were in the north part of England, the expectation in wine was just beyond what I was expecting at the beginning.
Did you find it challenging to understand people with a very thick northern accent?
It was very difficult, but I think what makes me to, I think what was easy, it was that my the head sommelier, which is now working in Australia, and this gentleman Remy, that used to be my assistant as well in my few different businesses. Was there, so it was easier. When you have a French-related people surrounding you, it helps you to develop. But the beginning, the first year was very difficult with the language, definitely.
So, how did you end up working for Heston Blumenthal?
So I was at the time still in York, where I was working with Remy Cousin, and he was my head sommelier at the time, and I don't know, when he moved to Fat Duck in 2009, it was the beginning of 2009. I think actually it was July 2009. Isabel, one of the head sommelier from the Fat Duck, contacted me. Is like, I heard about you. I know that you are a good person, but I would like just to know if you would like to work for us. And I was like, I don't want, because I had so much obviously bad experience from Three-Star, being working in stage in different Three-Star back in France at the time. I didn't want to go back to that path where you're treated like no one and you just have to do what you need to do. But
this was after Fat Duck was named the #1 restaurant in the world, wasn't it?
It was 2005. Fat Duck was named, and 2009 I had the opportunity to work for them, but first time I refused. I mean, I talked with Isa, and I was not committed to go for those reasons that I was mentioning now. But then after, obviously, everything started to change. I realized that actually after once I refused, twice I refused. The third time I was working in Winchester in the same company as Hôtel du Vin, but in a different hotel in the south part of England. And Remy came to see me. It's like, listen, that is the last opportunity for you to work there. And I was like, okay. So I decided to actually to move to the Fat Duck in February. Actually, it was in 2008 when he moved there. So in 2009, beginning of 2009, I started to join the team in February with the Fat Duck. And I remember the first interview I had with Isa. He's like, look, I'm not saying that I can promise anything to you, but I can see that with your talent you can go far. And I was like, okay. And he said, in 2 years I will make you to be a very strong sommelier in the business.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, fine, let's see. It's 2 years from there. And I was like, you never know. So I was like, okay, if you said it, maybe you know it, maybe you have a kind of a power to see those things. But at the beginning I didn't believe it, but I was like, it's a new experience for me. So I jump into it. But in the meantime, obviously, it was in actually that was in November, and I first moved in October in Winchester, and I met obviously my wife, which is now, and it was back in December when we start to date. And January I was going to move everything, and I was like, okay, maybe I should stay in Hotel Livan. And I was like, maybe it's not the right decision. Okay, I'll move to the Fat Duck. So we decided to actually, it was just the beginning of our relationship, and I was like, okay, fine. I'll go there and see how it is. At the end of the day, woman is a woman, and we see how it goes.
Luckily, they both worked out.
Everything works out very well, and since 2009, obviously the experience is still going on, and I'm still working for Heston after all those years. Obviously, winning different accolades, and being a stronger person, being a stronger professional, and everything. Obviously, each restaurant is different, and each view is different. But along the way, you put your life in a way that you work for yourself, and you need to be stronger all the time. And even though you work for someone, you need to always believe that yes, you work for someone, but at the same time you need to make a career for yourself. So that was the right decision, I think.
After many years and following this different pathway, working in other restaurants in France and in other parts of England, what was it like going back to a Three-Michelin-Star restaurant and having had that behind you and that strength and confidence? What was it like going back into that environment?
I don't know. I think the Fat Duck is a very different 3-star than other restaurants. It's not as classic. You really need to put your personality into the floor, and learn with such a very high strategy and a high demand and standards as the Fat Duck is. And first of all, the first thing is you are surrounded by such amazing professionals from all over the world, and that was the key point. Work with different culture, work with different assets and skilled people. You really need to push yourself every single day to be able to shine. I would say, but without to shine, because you don't want to be a star. You want just to become a better professional in the business.
So, how long were you at Fat Duck before new opportunities started to present themselves?
So I started in Feb 09. Everything was perfect. Moving to after 2 years, obviously, that we mentioned, Isa, I become some of the youngest in the England to become on the top of some of the sommelier competition, winning different accolades. Everything start to kind of like move. I start to do competition for England, young sommelier in England, and the Fat Duck always wanted to kind of move their side to be able to to refurbish that restaurant. And Courchevel, Monaco, New York was always mentioned, but actually we end up to be in Australia, where I never thought I would be coming in Australia one day. And actually the Fat Duck moved in January 2015 to Australia, in Melbourne, where we moved within the Crown, and we were be able to be there for 7 months. And I was like, fine, it's going to be another experience, and learn more about other wines, and be a challenge again. That was amazing, because the challenge is always something that pushed me a lot.
Was the challenge also kind of in essence taking what the Fat Duck is and placing it in somewhere completely different in the world, and introducing totally new clientele to this kind of experience, rather than going somewhere and establishing something new, or coming and working somewhere that's very established, and like the context of the experience changes completely, because the menu is the menu. It's not specific to that place. It is Heston's menu, and the wine list to a certain extent is similarly designed. Was that a really unique experience doing that?
I mean, it's unique, but at the same time, we were taking an English restaurant in Australia, and that was doing what we were doing every single day, and replicate it in a way for for the world and for Australian communities is very open to many different culture of food, and obviously you can see it in many different ways. Obviously, different culture that you have in Melbourne are quite open to what Heston Blumenthal is. He's been doing MasterChef for many years, and since then, obviously, they were all waiting for someone like Heston Blumenthal to come in that country and showcase a little bit more what is hospitality in terms of memories, journey, and the exposure of flavors that we could give. But the wine list was just is not obviously the main, let's say, part there. The wine list was made with definitely something more Australian rather than European wines, and that was definitely a big challenge for us as a sommeliers, because we touch different Australian wines or other, let's say, foreign wines in Australia or in England, sorry. But I think what was the key was to be able to work with boutique, small, and quite innovative winery. That was the key part.
Do you like the opportunity, I should say, working in Melbourne, kind of introducing or like interacting with Australian consumers and showing them Australian wines from that kind of English perspective to say, this is why we love this wine? And do you find that some customers sort of say, oh, wow, yeah, I never thought of it from that perspective. It's really interesting. I never really had the opportunity to drink old wines from Yeringberg, for example.
I mean, what is very important, I think the first things that start to take in my brain is that to be able to leave England and move to Melbourne and still find the joy of, learning and exploring. The difference was that from England, vineyards perspective are very low. So when I was working in Loire, I could just do 15, 20 minutes of car and be in a vineyard.
Sure.
And that was the amazing change in Melbourne. Traveling to Loire Valley, Geelong, Macedon, you start to actually, everything you learn about Australia, because I was already learning about Australian wines back in England, because, to become advanced master sommelier and master sommelier, you really need to push those boundaries and push your studies. But when I traveled to Melbourne, everything makes sense. I was like, wow, this is like Loire Valley with a different dimension. Obviously, Melbourne is a very kind of, dynamic, explosive and newest city. So everything was all about finding something where I could just find the love of wine. And what I find is that there is so much respect, love, and passion on those beautiful wineries which are surrounding Melbourne.
Mm. And you chose to stay in Melbourne when the Fat Duck became Dinner by Heston, and you've been here for a few years now, and you have a very strong and dedicated team working with you at the restaurant.
I mean, at the beginning, opportunity came. We were talking with our head sommelier Isabel, and it's never been kind of the factor to stay. My wife was actually, we just getting married. I left 7 months in Australia. Everything was a little bit messy. You are alone in a country where you don't know, you don't have a person which is close to you, so everything doesn't link things. But above all, Heston Blumenthal asked me to come to dinner and be able to to showcase what I learned along the way with them. And so I stay in Melbourne for now 3 years altogether, 2 years in dinner, and I've got maybe one of the greatest team in Melbourne that I have with I've got 13 people altogether with the bar and sommeliers, and I have so much luck to be able to work with such amazing professional.
And also, it must be a challenging but rewarding experience working with local winemakers and Australian-based importers of European wines. Do you enjoy the challenge of sourcing interesting wines and tasting new things and learning?
I mean, there's one thing I remember is like when I did my my year in wine in school in France, I was first of all lucky to work in a school where the person that teaches us about wines was so passionate and loving about wine that everything makes sense. Work with small biodynamic, organic, or even natural, or even different wineries. Go to pick grapes and be able to see how wines are made. And when you come to Australia, you see that actually everything is very similar, but the understanding is different. But the pleasure and the passion is there, and that you cannot forget about it. That with passion And with dedication, you can achieve anything. And
Yeah.
that is what I have done since the day one, is to put every single time, second, minute into something which is so valuable. Hospitality is not just about serving a plate, serving a glass of wine. It's all about welcoming guests and welcoming someone in your home. And that you cannot change it. It's a natural way of living, is the humanity of it.
Absolutely. Well, I of course, with your with Mattia, you're both studying, preparing for Master Sommelier. You both passed one or two components of it, and there are many more challenges and experiences to come, of course. And this time of year, very busy with the restaurant. So I really, really do appreciate you making some time to come and chat about your background, your journey. If you would like people to follow you on social media, do you want to share any social media accounts?
Yeah, of course. Being French and I would say half Hungarian now. So my kind of big word is Oremus, and Oremus 1985 on Instagram. On Twitter, obviously, I follow obviously most of the wines from Hungary, so I've got so much love with those wines. So I name it against something obviously that I visit with Vega Sicilia. I mean Oremus in Hungary, and being in a top vintage like 85, you cannot forget about it.
It's my sister's vintage as well. But thank you very much, and I do encourage everyone to make the time to go to Dinner by Heston. And if you see Mattia out and about, please do let him know that you heard him on the podcast.
We'll do it, definitely.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Vincast. I have been James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. And as always, you can find me on social media. I'm at Intrepid Wino on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter at the Vincast. I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast on any number of different podcast sharing apps and programs, such as iTunes, Player FM, Stitcher, Podbean, iHeartRadio. Subscribing means that you get the newest episode as soon as it becomes available. But many of those platforms are also a great way to share your appreciation for the show and for the guests who generously donate their time by leaving a rating and review. And it also is a great way for the podcast to get out to more of an audience. I always appreciate anything that people can do to get the word out. Why not just tell someone in real life about the podcast, because I really appreciate new listeners. Of course, you can find me on my website, intrepidwino.com. There's lots of different content there. I've had the opportunity to travel quite a lot, and I've written about some of the places that I've been. And you can also find my YouTube channel. Intrepid Wino is the account, and there's lots of different videos there, including approaching 200 editions of Let's Taste, where I look at Australian wines, and also my winemaking experiences. Please do check out the Vino Intrepido wines. I work exclusively with Italian varieties grown here in Australia. But guys, I'm really excited to get some more episodes of the podcast out very soon. Thank you so much to everyone who stuck with me, and thanks to all the new listeners. I really appreciate your support. Until next time, bye.
Earbuds, Melbourne's podcast network. earbudsnetwork.com